Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing today? I'm doing pretty fantastic. Today's video, as you can tell by the title, is going to be me recommending you some books that you can read on a rainy day, because it has been raining here where I live for the past, I want to say 2 weeks, almost every day. And when it's raining outside all of the time, I don't know about you guys, but that kind of makes me want to curl up in a little ball and read some books, watch some series. To start off, I'm gonna recommend you some YA, some young adult books to read. The first young adult book I want to recommend to you is Pegasus and the Flame by Kate O'Hearn. I read this book when I was, I don't know, maybe 12 or something, and I really enjoyed it. So I haven't read it in a long time, so I don't know if I would still enjoy it if I read it now. But basically it centers around Pegasus, who ends up crash landing on top of a Manhattan skyscraper, or not necessarily a skyscraper, but like an apartment complex that is quite tall. And this girl discovers Pegasus, and together they have to save the world, kind of, because it's filled with a lot of Roman mythology. There's a little bit of Greek mythology in it as well, which confused me at the time, because I was like, you're talking about these Roman gods, but then you call some of the gods by their Greek names, and I'm confused. The world is sort of imploding because the gods are having a war, as they like to do apparently, and it is going to affect the human world, and so this young girl and Pegasus have to go on a quest to save the world. I thought it would be good rainy day reading because it's, you know, mythology. Feels like a kind of rainy day vibe to me, but also the beginning of the story is a storm, like a massive lightning and thunderstorm in New York. And the girl's father, or mother, I think it's her father, says to her, don't go near the windows when there's lightning. And so I thought, when it's raining outside, you might want to read about a storm. Or maybe you don't want to read about a storm, but I feel like it fits the vibe. The second recommendation I have for you that still falls under the YA category is The Prince of Mist by Ruiz Zafòn. He writes mostly adult fiction. Every time I say adult fiction, I feel like there's an assumption that it's going to be spicy or that there's going to be sexual things in it, but it's not necessarily. It's just more mature themes. It's quite gruesome and morbid and twisted. But he did write a few YA books, and this is one of them. I do remember that I loved this book. It was very spooky and very eerie because it's called The Prince of Mist, and you get this whole misty vibe. And there's people appearing out of the mist, and you can't really see who they are until they're right in front of you, and they could be dangerous, and it feels like a rainy day topic. It has also just started rain again. So if you hear pitter-patter on the roof, that's because it's raining. 1943. As war sweeps across Europe, Max Carver's father moves his family away from the city to an old wooden house on the coast. But as soon as they arrive, strange things begin to happen. Max discovers a garden filled with eerie statues. His sisters are plagued by unsettling dreams and voices. A box of old films opens a window to the past. Most unsettling of all are rumors about the previous owners and the mysterious disappearance of their son. As Max delves into the past, he uncovers the terrifying story of the Prince of Mist, a sinister shadow who emerges from the night to settle old scores, then appears with the first mists of dawn. It's quite small. It is like also quite large type. So I feel like you could read this all in one day if you wanted to, if you had a whole day that you could spend just reading, and it was raining, you could read this all in a day. The third book in the YA category that I want to recommend to you, I don't own a copy of. I borrowed a copy of it from my friend, and I read it in 2 days. I inhaled the book. It is called S.T.A.G.S by M.A. Bennett. This is also kind of a, I don't want to say a murder mystery, but it is kind of a murder mystery, like a whodunit mystery, dark academia kind of situation. It revolves around Greer, who has recently gotten a scholarship to a very prestigious school where only really smart and really rich people go. And it's a private boarding school in England somewhere. and she gets a scholarship to go to the school. She's very excited, but she goes there. She doesn't have any friends, and she's trying to make new friends when she gets this mysterious invitation to go to the richest and most popular boy in the school's house for the half-term weekend. And there are a bunch of other people who are invited as well. Their weekend is revolving around blood sports, 3 blood sports: hunting, shooting, and fishing. And things quickly go south because you suddenly realize that they're not actually hunting animals, they're hunting each other. And I think it's a perfect read for your rainy day. I have another addition to the YA category. I wasn't planning on talking about this book, but as I was talking about stags, I remembered the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series by Ransom. That was just a quick mention. If you've heard of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, you know why I'm recommending this as a rainy day read, because it is very eerie and very mysterious and just great for feeling all the mystery feels of a rainy day. So the first book I want to recommend to you in this category is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I know in America it's called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle because you already had The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and that was apparently too confusing. So in America it's The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and everywhere else in the world it is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. As you can tell, Evelyn dies 7 times in this story. It centers around a man called Aidan who gets invited to this manor, I think it's called Blackheath Manor, for a party because Evelyn, the daughter of the Hardcastles, has come home from her trips abroad and she's home to stay, I suppose, and now they are throwing a party for her because she's like the prodigal son returned, except she's the prodigal daughter. So they're throwing this party for her. They invite a bunch of guests. As the night transpires, Evelyn gets killed at the end of the night. This is not a spoiler, it is literally in the title of the book. And this man, Aidan, is one of the guests who is invited, and he has to solve the murder. But until he solves the murder, the same day that Evelyn gets murdered will keep repeating itself until he actually figures out who killed her. And every day, he keeps waking up in a different person's body. So he keeps... every time he goes to sleep, he wakes up in another one of the guests' bodies. So he inhabits 7 different people, basically, over the course of this book, trying to figure out what happened to Evelyn Hardcastle, who killed her, and trying to escape Blackheath, because he cannot leave Blackheath until he also solves the murder. It literally starts out with a rainy scene, so if that's not the epitome of a rainy day book. Also, the sun has now decided to come out as I'm trying to film this rainy day books video. My battery died. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the glare out of here a little bit. Yeah, my battery died and I had to charge it, so I had to take a break. The next thing I want to recommend to you in the mystery/thriller section is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I was actually first going to recommend Girl on the Train, but then I remembered that I had recently read Into the Water, and I feel like this fits the vibe better. Not only because there's water in the title and rain is made of water, but because, I don't know, I feel like it's just a little bit more spooky. Can you tell that my definition of a rainy day read is basically a spooky, misty, rainy book? It centers around a girl whose mother mysteriously dies. Some people say it's a suicide, other people are not convinced. But also earlier in the same year, another young woman had died in the same way. So it's an uncanny coincidence that they both died the same way. This girl's aunt then has to come and look after her mother died because her dad is not in the picture. Together they have to try and figure out how the girl's mom died. Was it really suicide? Was it a murder? Who killed her? If it was a murder, it's set in close to a forest and a big lake, and it's just good. I know a lot of people don't like Paula Hawkins' writing, or they feel like it's overrated or something, I don't know, but give it a try. You might actually end up liking it. The first fantasy book I want to recommend to you is that's a tongue twister. When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. I read this book in January and I loved it. This book centers around a young girl, again, set in America in the 1950s, and it's basically an alternative history where there are times when women transform into dragons and then they fly away, and sometimes they disappear forever, sometimes they come back, but the humans and the government don't want the dragons to come back because everybody's afraid of dragons because they're massive. And why would you not be afraid of a dragon? It can breathe fire and kill you. But anyway, so this young girl's aunt turns into a dragon and disappears, and then the story sort of follows what happens to her family after her aunt disappears. There are more tragedies that befall her. I don't want to spoil things for you. It's kind of a coming of age story. It's about love, it's about loss, it's about family, it's about finding yourself, it's about acceptance, it's about all of the good things. And I feel like, why wouldn't you want to read about dragons when it's raining? The next book I want to recommend to you in the fantasy section is A Discovery of Witches. I read this book at the end of last year sometime, and it follows a witch who doesn't want to be a witch, who sort of suppresses her powers. She's like, I'm gonna live a normal human life. I don't want any of this witchy business in my life. And throughout the book she meets other magical creatures, namely a vampire and some demons and some other witches, and they discover that she's actually quite powerful and she shouldn't be suppressing her powers, and then dark forces want to use her powers for their own evil plans. She falls in love. This book was really long, so there's a lot happening in this book, but yes, basically it's about a witch set in Oxford, I think, and it's rainy a lot of the time, and it's witches and vampires and demons, and I feel like that goes with rain. The last book I want to recommend to you is a romance book. It's Out of Love by Hazel Hayes. This is a love story, or the story of a breakup told in reverse. So you start where the couple has broken up, and then you move back in time to where the couple first meets. And you go through all the roller coasters in between, how the relationship sort of goes back to being good, and all the trials and tribulations that come with being in a relationship. And I thought, if you are in a cozy mood on a rainy day and you don't want to read mystery or thriller or fantasy or, I don't know, spooky stories, you might want to read a romance book. It is heart-wrenching. It might break your heart a little bit. It is quite sad sometimes because it's like you see this couple at the end of their breakup, and this is where you meet them. When it's bad and they don't like each other anymore and they've broken up and they're both hurt, and then you move back in time to when they were in love and when they first fell in love, and you're just like, how did it all go wrong? But that is kind of the point of the story, because anybody who has ever been in a relationship and has had the relationship end, you kind of always think like, where did this go wrong, and why did we even like each other in the first place if your breakup was bad? Or if you have hard feelings towards the other person in your relationship after it has ended. You have all of these questions, and this book kind of asks the same questions. Yes, so if you want a romance book that is very cute and sweet and has some nice romantic plot points, but is also kind of sad for your rainy day, I would recommend Out of Love. Those are my rainy day reads recommendations. I cannot hold up a massive stack for you because I have only got 3 books that I actually have copies of. I hope I could recommend you something that you haven't read yet, something that sounds intriguing enough for you to want to pick it up and read it. I will leave a list, of course, of all the books that I mentioned in the description of the video, as I usually do. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. It really supports the channel. If you would like to see more videos from me and more bookish content, you can subscribe to my channel. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you again next week with another video. Bye.